Welcome to Mystery Universe. Remember to support our channel, please subscribe. Today, I want to tell you about an amazing story that struck me when I heard about it. And now I can't wait to tell you about it. I hope you will find it as interesting as I did while preparing this material. Decades ago, when a Dutch private collector bought a golden Buddha statue, he had no idea what a surprise lurked inside. The papier-mâché statue, about the size of a seated man, covered in lacquer and gold paint, has a dark history. It was probably kept for centuries in a monastery in southeast China before being taken out of the country during the Cultural Revolution. The tumultuous period of social upheaval in communist China began in 1966, when Chairman Mao Zedong called on citizens to confiscate property, dismantle education systems, and attack bourgeois cultural institutions. During restoration work in the 1990s, it was discovered that the statue was neither solid nor hollow. When the restorer removed the statue from the wooden platform, he noticed two pads with Chinese inscriptions lying under the statue's knees. When the pads were removed, human remains were discovered. Scientific research has revealed that the ancient Buddhist statue contains within it the perfectly preserved remains of a 1,000-year-old mummified monk. Apart from a possible example of self-mummification, the statue is believed to be the only such example in the world. Researchers believe the statue contains the body of a Buddhist master named Liu Quan, who may have practiced the tradition of self-mummification to reach his final resting place, sitting in lotus posture. The monk is believed to have starved himself to death in an act of extreme spiritual devotion, and this occurred in China or Tibet in the 10th century. Monks often practiced self-mummification, but to find a mummified monk inside a statue is really unusual. For a monk who wanted to attain enlightenment and be honored as a living Buddha, self-mummification was the only option. The practice was also widespread in Japan, beginning around the 11th century and continuing until it was banned in the 19th century. Historians have an idea of how Liu Quan began its spiritual transformation. There is a 3,000-day training process of turning the body of an ordinary ascetic into a mummy, the Sokushin Butsu. A key element of the process is diet. Japanese ascetics usually abstained from grains, excluding wheat, rice, millet, and soya beans. Instead, they ate nuts, berries, pine needles, tree bark, and resin, which is why the Sokushin Butsu diet was called Mokujikyo, or tree eating. Over time, the diet became more strict, depriving the body of nutrients and eliminating fat and moisture that could contribute to decomposition after death. X-rays of the Sokushin Butsu even showed river stones in the intestines of mummies. In addition to weight loss, certain features of the diet may have helped preserve the body after death. For example, certain types of herbs and toxic cycad nuts may have inhibited bacterial growth. It is said that at least some Sokushin Butsu drank tea made from rushi, the juice of Toxicodendron vernicifluum, which is commonly used to make lacquer. Rushi could act as a kind of embalming fluid, making the body toxic to potential flesh-eating microorganisms. Once the ascetic was ready to attempt to become a Sokushin Butsu, he would enter a tiny burial chamber and be buried alive, with a small opening for air to enter the chamber. There he would sit, repeating sutras and ringing a bell to show that he was still alive. As soon as the bell stopped ringing, the cell was sealed completely. After 3 years, it would be reopened to see if the attempt at self-mummification had been successful. If the body was found in a preserved state, the monk was elevated to Buddha status. His body was removed from the tomb and placed in a temple where it was worshipped and venerated. If the body decayed, the monk was sealed again in his tomb and honored, but not worshipped. So the Liu Quan starved themselves for almost a decade in their spiritual journey, eating water, seeds, and nuts. When the monk began to enter a trance-like state, he was sealed inside a statue. He ate roots, pine bark, and a toxic tree sap-based tea for another 1,000 days, food and air fed through a small tube. In his final weeks, Liu Quan reduced his food intake, drinking only water. As he slowly starved to death, his breathing rate decreased until eventually death set in. Monks mummified in this way were said to have attained enlightenment. The fellow monks placed Liu Quan's body next to the fire to dry the body, eventually putting his remains on display in the monastery. After 200 years, when his remains began to deteriorate, the monks realized that he needed extra support and preservation. His mummified body was placed inside an elaborately lacquered Buddha statue. The mummified monks became not only the center of religious worship, but were also important to the monastery's economy because they attracted pilgrims who brought donations. In the 1990s, scientists were unable to remove the mummy because of the risk of decay. At the time, scientific analysis was not advanced enough to document the exact condition of the remains. Recently, the mummy was studied by an interdisciplinary team of experts, including radiocarbon dating specialists and textile analysts, at the Meander Medical Center in Amersfoort, the Netherlands. Bone samples were taken for DNA analysis. A team of German, Dutch and Italian scientists performed a CT scan that showed the monk's skeleton in great detail. The CT scan showed that inside the statue is a perfectly preserved body with skin and muscles, a complete mummy, not just a skeleton. Analysts speculate that the monk was between 30 and 50 years old at the time of his death. Using an endoscope, experts extracted samples from the mummy's chest and abdominal cavities, finding that the monk's organs had been removed and replaced with clumps of paper with Chinese characters. Historians and linguists continue to work on deciphering the texts. As the Buddha has begun to be exhibited outside China, controversy has arisen. Community leaders in Yangchun Village, Fujian Province, have written twice to the collector who bought the statue with the mummified monk. The community leaders are convinced that the statue contains the remains of the nearly 1,000-year-old patriarch Zhang Gong, who was lost in Yangchun Village in Daishan County in December 1995. Zhang Gong is said to have been a respected monk during the Song Dynasty, 960-1279. After he died, people mummified his body and turned it into a statue, which was worshipped until it was reported stolen 2 decades ago. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Mystery Universe. Thank you.